new chapter. As Paul Ryan prepares to lead as Speaker, the House takes up a controversial budget vote. Unity to counter religious extremism. Pope Francis calls for closer interfaith collaboration. World Series Game 1 drama. 14 innings, 5+ hours, and the father of a starting pitcher dies just before the game. And burying the dead. Catholic high school students volunteer as pallbearers for Detroit's homeless. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, October 28, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. House Republicans nominate Wisconsin's Paul Ryan to be their next Speaker. This comes on the same day the House votes on a 2-year budget truce. Jason Calvi reports from the Capitol tonight.
Brian, Paul Ryan received 200 votes. His main rival, Daniel Webster of Florida, received 43. Now, if Ryan becomes the Speaker, he'd be the youngest since 1869 and yet another Catholic in that role. He says he wants the Republican Party to come together in unity.
House Republicans pick Paul Ryan for Speaker of the House.
This begins a new day in the House of Representatives. Our party has lost its vision, and we're going to replace it with a vision. We believe that the country is on the wrong track. We think the country's headed in the wrong direction, and we have an obligation here in the People's House to do the people's business, to give this country a better way forward, to give this country an alternative.
Tomorrow, the full House will likely approve him as Speaker Boehner's successor.
I wanted to do my best to clean the barn. I didn't want him to walk into a dirty barn full of you-know-what.
Speaker Boehner says the budget deal is part of that cleanup. Paul Ryan says the deal makes meaningful reforms, and he'll vote for it. But yesterday, he criticized the secretive budget process.
I think this process stinks.
Speaker Boehner agreed, but says the deal is better than the alternative.
I'm in full agreement. It stinks. This is not the way to run a railroad. When you've got a situation that we're dealing with today, it's like it wasn't any choice.
President Obama praised the budget deal.
I'm pretty happy about that.
But as GOP presidential candidates get ready for their third debate tonight, Rand Paul says he'll filibuster it.
It will raise the debt with no limit. It basically is a blank check to the president and to Congress to raise as much money and spend as much money as you want till March 2017.
We do expect the Senate to vote on this budget deal next week. The budget deal resolves issues on spending domestically and for the military, as well as borrowing through 2017, just in time for the next president. Brian?
We delve deeper into the budget issue in a little bit. Thank you, Jason. Meanwhile, other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. A sheriff's deputy is fired after a video shows him violently yanking a student from her desk. The FBI launches an investigation into the incident. It's sparking national outrage. Catherine Zeltner reports.
Okay, you gonna come with me or am I gonna make you?
Shocking video of South Carolina school resource officer Ben Fields yanking a 16-year-old student out of her seat, then dragging her across the floor.
Hands behind your back. Give me your hands.
According to authorities, the student was asked to leave the classroom, and when she refused, Fields was called in to help, and that's when the situation escalated. Fields was immediately suspended without pay. Late Tuesday, word of a third video surfaced, showing a different perspective.
In one video, we've seen 2 videos, and now we've learned that there's a third video. It actually shows the student hitting the school resource officer with her fist and striking him. Now, what she does is not what I'm looking at. What I'm looking at is what our school resource officer did.
The student, who was released to her parents after the incident, faces a charge of disturbing schools. Another female student faces the same charge, her mother says, after standing up for that classmate. This isn't the first time Deputy Fields was involved in a violent encounter. In 2007, a couple claimed he used excessive force after questioning them about a noise complaint. They filed suit, but a jury ultimately ruled against them in favor of Fields. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. As Republican presidential candidates debate tonight, for the first time, Donald Trump is no longer the frontrunner. The latest national poll puts retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson ahead of the Donald. Donald Trump's campaign music used to be the best. But not anymore. No, Ben Carson is the champ now. Carson goes into tonight's debate leading Trump in the latest national poll from CBS New York Times. It shows 26% of Republicans prefer Carson for president, just 22% prefer Trump. That's within the poll's margin of error, but it's still the first time in more than 100 days someone else has been on top.
First of all, I am a great Christian, and I am. Remember that. And I do well with the evangelicals. But the evangelicals left me down a little bit this last month. I don't know what I did.
Carson and Trump will stand center stage during tonight's debate in Boulder, flanked by Senator Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush. The debate is being hosted by CNBC, presumably bringing economic policy to the forefront and possibly giving an edge to business veterans Trump and Carly Fiorina. Fiorina made very strong showings in both previous debates, but she's struggled since then to turn that into strong poll numbers.
The opponent started to attack her record as CEO of Hewlett-Packard, and she didn't absorb those hits too well. So this is an opportunity for her to reintroduce herself again and discuss some things that she knows that she can speak with authority on, but she has to absolutely have another great debate.
That debate is tonight in Boulder, Colorado. Former House Speaker Dennis Hastert pleads guilty to federal charges of evading banking laws. Hastert reached a plea agreement earlier this month. The indictment says he agreed to pay someone $3.5 million to hide past misconduct. The allegations stem from charges of sexual abuse when he taught and coached in Illinois. Sentencing is set for the end of February. The Illinois Republican served as Speaker of the House from 1999 to 2007. Germany's top security official sharply criticizes Austria for, quote, dumping migrants at the border. Germany's interior minister saying Austria drops migrants off during the night without any warning. He says both countries have agreed to improve cooperation, which he expects to happen immediately. Meanwhile, in Slovenia, migrants and refugees wait to board buses. Slovenia's prime minister vows to build fences on its borders with Croatia if the plan to redirect migrants fails. The small Alpine nation criticizes Croatia for sending more migrants than Slovenia can handle. Nigerian troops rescue more than 300 captives from Boko Haram camps. The Nigerian army says 30 terrorists were killed in yesterday's raid. Most of the rescued captives are women and children. Arms and ammunition were also taken during the operation. Nigerian troops have rescued hundreds of Boko Haram captives this year. None of the 219 schoolgirls kidnapped last spring are among those rescued. Israel's prime minister lashes out at an Arab lawmaker for visiting a sensitive holy site. This morning, Basil Gattas, a member of Israel's parliament, ascended the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asked all lawmakers not to visit the site at the center of a rash of violence between Israelis and Palestinians. Gattas says he does not recognize Netanyahu's authority. Pro-lifers claim victory tonight after a 27-year fight to close a Chicago abortion clinic. The Albany Medical Surgical Center Family Planning Associates closed its doors earlier this month. It comes in the wake of safety inspections conducted by the Illinois Department of Public Health. From its opening in 1988, Pro-Life Action League has organized sidewalk counseling, protests, and prayer vigils. Well, Game 1 of the 2015 World Series goes into the early morning hours as the Royals beat the Mets in 14 innings. Baseball fans have a lot to talk about today. In addition to the extra innings last night, a rare inside-the-park home run, and a brief broadcast outing after the Fox production truck lost power. The game ties for the longest World Series game in history, taking 5 hours and 9 minutes. There was also a very sad side note. Royal starter Edinson Volquez's father died several hours before the game, but he wasn't told until after he pitched.
You know, we found out about it before the game, and the wishes of the family was, you know, let Eddie pitch. So I was kind of keeping my eye, didn't want him to hear about it.
Volquez has since returned to Dominican Republic. It's unclear when he'll come back to the team. Game 2 of the series is tonight in Kansas City. Coming up, Pope Francis encourages greater interfaith collaboration to counter religious extremism. And it's round 3 for Republican presidential hopefuls who debate in Boulder, Colorado tonight. On this 28th of October, we celebrate 2 of the 12 apostles, Simon, known as the Zealot, and Jude, who is patron of impossible causes. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. In the face of religious extremism, Pope Francis calls for greater interfaith collaboration. Today marks the 50th anniversary of the post-Vatican II Nostra Aetate declaration. It's seen as the turning point in the Catholic Church's relations with other religions, the Pope devoting his Wednesday general audience to its teaching.
In realtà, benché nessuna religione sia immune dal rischio.
Pope Francis saying no religion is immune from the risk of fundamentalism or extremism. He continues, we must look at the positive values they, the other religions, propose, which are sources of hope. Father Brian Lobo with the Gregorian University Center for Interreligious Studies joining us from Rome. Father, it's been 50 years since this document changed the Church's approach to other faiths. How much has changed practically in that time?
Well, I think a lot has been changed because, well, there is a certain openness to other religions, and this openness itself has taken the Church to cross boundaries, to open up horizons of thinking about other religions, and to accept various, let's say, values, spiritual, religious, and even other values, to accept them as part of a, let's say, human journey. Because there was a time when the Church had this tendency not to accept something that came from outside.
Where do you see this interreligious dialogue taking us maybe over the next 50 years?
Well, I think interreligious dialogue is obviously going to lead to a lot of interaction between religions. I mean positive interaction. Because unless and until, as we all know, and this word has been repeated off and on, dialogue, but it has got to be also dialogue of life, dialogue of, dialogue at many levels of human life. So when we are dialoguing with the religious other, we are automatically going and first, you're calling him a friend, you're trying to, go and shake hands with him, you're trying to make him your friend. So at least I see interreligious dialogue in that way. And by that, we are breaking the boundaries, and we are trying to create a kind of a world that will lead to peace, that will lead to freedom.
Father Brian Lobo, thank you for joining us from Rome tonight on EWTN News Nightly.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks a lot, Brian.
And there may be some lively discussion about immigration at tonight's GOP presidential debate in Boulder, Colorado. Donald Trump has used inflammatory language addressing the issue during his campaign. A group of conservative Hispanics meeting in Boulder this week warns that Latino voters won't stand for it. Alfonso Aguilar is director of American Principles Project Latino Partnership, meeting with some fellow Hispanics there in Boulder, Colorado, where the debate is tonight. Alfonso, how is the immigration issue a gateway to Hispanics who lean toward the conservative side?
Well, immigration is not the most important issue for the Latino electorate, but it's a significant issue. It's a gateway issue. If Republicans are not constructive on the issue, the Latino voters are just not going to listen to them on the other issues, the economy, national security, the issue of life and marriage that, as you know, Latinos care about. And it's interesting because Republicans, Latinos could actually identify with many of the positions that Republicans have on those issues. But because Republicans are not being positive, constructive on the issue of immigration, Latinos are just not listening to them.
Well, Donald Trump loves being brash. Is he doing that at the expense of Hispanics, and how is the community reacting to that?
Exactly, and that's why we held a meeting yesterday of the top Latino conservative leaders in the country. We sent a very clear message that if he is the GOP nominee, we're not going to work with him. We're not going to support him. We don't think that because of his rhetoric and the proposals that he's putting forward, that he would get enough Latino support to actually win the White House. And today, you cannot win the White House. The GOP cannot win the White House if they don't do better with Latino voters.
Which candidates do you think will do better?
Well, the good thing is that we cannot generalize about the GOP field. There are many good candidates who are good conservatives and have a good position on immigration. Certainly Governor Bush, Senator Marco Rubio, even Ben Carson has called for a guest worker program under which undocumented immigrants could get a path to legal status. Carlos Fiorina is good on the issue. So there are many others, even Rand Paul. So the sad thing is that everybody's generalizing and assuming that all Republicans agree with Donald Trump, and that's not true.
I've seen where you were accused of not being there to formulate a position, but to justify one. Response?
No, not at all. Look, I think, as you know, this issue has been politicized by both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans. What we want is a solution. Americans, not only Hispanics, want a solution to immigration. And I'm not trying to justify anything. I'm a conservative, and because I'm a conservative, I believe in immigration. Immigration helps not only immigrants, but actually American workers. With immigration, we can immigration actually generates a more robust economy. It can create better paying jobs for American workers. So it's a win-win for everyone. So I don't have to justify that. I just think that it is what it is. And I think that conservatives have to reclaim, Republicans have to reclaim the immigration issue to be more competitive and win the White House.
Alfonso Aguilar, Skyping with us from Boulder, Colorado. Thanks, Alfonso.
Thank you so much for having me.
Up next, a hasty budget deal highlights surprise bipartisanship so long absent in Washington. And these Detroit Catholic high school students live out one of the corporal works of mercy. Here is a glimpse of the Pope's general audience in St. Peter's Square on a rainy Wednesday in Rome. Thanks so much for joining us. It's a rainy Wednesday in D.C. as well. In a rare show of bipartisanship, a budget deal gained support on Capitol Hill. The House just passed it this afternoon. So what does the deal include? Simply put, it means no government shutdown or default, no spike in Medicare premiums. The deal boosts spending for Pentagon and domestic agencies by $80 billion over the next 2 years. It offsets the increased spending with cuts elsewhere. We have Bill Hoagland, Senior Vice President at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Bill, given your extensive experience in budget and appropriations on Capitol Hill, what do you think of the deal? How do you rate it?
Major deals like this are never pretty, and this doesn't avoid this situation. It is not a pretty situation, but it is a major avoids a major set of catastrophes that could occur. The default that you mentioned potentially avoids a government shutdown in December. It also avoids some major cuts in the Medicare programs that would take place, major premium increases, and it also does a major advancement of the SSDI program, which would have avoided about a 20% reduction in benefits. So overall, it's not a deficit reduction package like previous packages, but it is necessary to go forward to avoid these very catastrophic issues that would take place.
Where are the cuts?
The cuts come primarily from issues associated with agricultural price supports. There are some care provisions in there that come down. They're minor. There are some premium increases for what you call the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. There are a number of small issues. There are issues associated with the reducing fraud, waste management. These are not the big ones at all, but they do score over time. This does not, as I said, this is not a major deficit reduction package. In fact, it just balances out, tries to pay for that $70 to $80 billion that you mentioned that's been added back for 2016 and 2017.
The big news is the bipartisanship. We haven't seen that in Washington in a long time. How was this deal struck?
I honestly think this came about because of the willingness of Speaker Boehner, Speaker Boehner, from placing himself on the altar of the Freedom Caucus. Had it not been for his decision to step down, I don't think this agreement would have taken place. That's how difficult these kinds of issues are.
Well, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul already says he's going to filibuster in the Senate.
Yes.
Does this pass the Senate?
It will eventually pass the Senate, but it will not pass quickly. It'll probably be toward the end of next week, a whole week from now. There'll be a filibuster, there'll be motions to proceed, and it will take some time to get through the Senate. The only hope is that the Senate does not amend this. If they amend it and send it back to the House, it'll take even longer.
Is this bipartisanship an anomaly, or is it something we can look forward to seeing a little more of here?
I wish I could say this is something that sets a framework for the future. I believe this is just an anomaly, but we still will have the crisis. We still have the differences, major differences of opinion on major policies. This was a necessary action to avoid, as I say, a default of the federal government, which has never occurred in the history of this country. So this was something that they had to do, and they held their nose and they voted for it.
What does the Bipartisan Policy Center do to try to restore a little sanity to this governmental
It's
process?
not easy. It's not easy. It's difficult. We try. We bring together people from both sides of the aisle. We try to talk through, bring stakeholders together. We try to build up and handle these things in a normal fashion of debate back and forth, and then take out those proposals. In fact, quite frankly, some of the provisions in here as it relates to the SSDI, the Social Security Disability Insurance Program, were proposals that the Bipartisan Policy Center worked on. So we do feel like we've had a little bit of success in that area.
Congratulations. I hope this gives you some hope
it does,
for the future.
Thank you very much.
Well, we really appreciate you coming and sharing with us, Bill Hoagland. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dozens of Catholic high school students sign up to serve as pallbearers at funerals for homeless veterans. It's part of a new service project at the University of Detroit Jesuit High School. Wyatt Goolsby reports.
Saying goodbye to those who served in the armed forces. Dozens of Patriot Riders came out to show their respect for 3 men they had never met. Homeless veterans whose bodies went unclaimed at the county morgue. Also on hand were half a dozen Detroit high school students.
It was just a very smooth process.
So what is a pallbearer? One that began 3 weeks earlier at University of Detroit Jesuit, an all-boys Catholic prep school. More than 50 students took part in a training session to serve as pallbearers at funerals for the homeless. And it is in keeping with the school's Jesuit mission to serve God and foster men for others.
We're being there for somebody, their last moments on earth before they pass on to the next world.
The newly formed Pallbearer Ministry's first outing was at the Great Lakes National Cemetery, where they did their part to give a proper send-off to the trio of veterans who served in the Army, Air Force, and Marines.
And I think this right here was a great example of having people who have died in the military that don't really have anybody left, and to have all that support there for them, and so that they will die with dignity.
A duty these young men will carry out as often as they can this school year, escorting the homeless to their final resting place. Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Wyatt. Britain's Prince Harry joins First Lady Michelle Obama today at a Virginia military base for programs that help injured service members. His Royal Highness delivered remarks before watching a wheelchair basketball game. He called for an end to the stigma surrounding mental health for people in all walks of life, but especially wounded warriors.
I'm in no doubt that my 2 deployments to Afghanistan changed the direction of my life. There is very little that can truly prepare you for the reality of war. The experiences can be stark and long-lasting. From that moment, I knew I had the responsibility to help all veterans who had made huge personal sacrifices for their countries to lead healthy and dignified lives after service.
Prince Harry is also promoting the Invictus Games. That's an international sports competition for injured military veterans. The games come to Orlando, Florida in May. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. As Pope Francis appeals for solidarity and prayers for earthquake victims in Pakistan and Afghanistan, we leave you tonight with the faces of those suffering as we join our prayers with those of the Holy Father.